David Fowley, we have known each other for about a decade. And I wonder what would possess you to put our 10-year-long friendship at risk by recommending that we watch and talk about What Remains, a movie that makes Requiem for a Dream look like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Wow. I thought Prisoners was a downer. This, Ran Huang's newest movie, his first feature film, which is very well done for a feature debut, but my goodness, talk about like rain clouds in the soul. Tell me about it. What is
Well,
this movie and why are we talking about it?
I mean, it came across. We get emails all the time, as critics, press, and when it has two Skarsgårds in it, and is it? See, it trips me up. It's Skarsgård, right?
Yeah, not to be
Not
confused. There's
not
also a
not
SARS
not
Peter.
Peter Sars. Okay, so it's
Right.
Skarsgård. Okay, when it actually has more than one Skarsgård, but I'll get to that in a moment. Um, and Andrea Riseborough.
Yes.
It piques my interest, and also from like a title or a filmmaker that is new to me. Like I didn't see this coming. Um, yeah, and I thought it might be of interest to you as well, and we could talk about it. And so, yeah, this movie I had to watch it a couple of times. Yeah,
You watched this a
yeah,
couple of
yeah,
and I
yeah,
congratulate you. I applaud you on
yeah,
still being here to
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about it because I
yeah.
wasn't sure I was going to make it to the end. Not of the movie, but
Hmm.
just as a person.
And it's okay. Based on what you're saying, I'm not quite sure how you feel about the movie right now yet. But so you did not like it. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. So
Well, we'll talk about it. I'm very curious to get your
no,
take.
no, no, no. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an a very interesting look at such a weird moment in a recent history that nobody really knew about. The filmmaker is a visual artist who started doing film. He's done some short film work, and one of his short films went to Cannes. I think probably within the last 5 years or so.
It
And
was 9 years ago, I think.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
I just want to put a tab in this real quick for folks watching this. David, right before we cut on here, you sent a link to an interview
yeah,
with Ran Huang, the
yeah,
director,
mhm,
that I'm going to link down below. So definitely check it out. It was very illuminating and
yeah,
kind of helped solidify some of my questions about the movie, which we'll get into. But
sure.
yeah, he
So
talked about that journey to Cannes and all that.
yeah, and I found it interesting that like his whole thing was, obviously when you and I can't speak from experience, but obviously when a first time filmmaker goes to Cannes, you start to, you know, build friendships and meet people and I guess a lot of people were thinking, well, what are you going to do about a feature? And he had no idea. And but he stumbled upon in London. He's while he was waiting somewhere, he stumbled upon a an article in GQ about this mental illness patient with like a personality disorder, um, probably multiple personality disorders, um, in Sweden or Swedish patient in Scandinavia who was confessing to all of these murders supposedly he was supposedly to be the first Swedish serial killer, and he was confessing to all these murders. A really committed therapist was involved. An investigator was also involved. In the end, though, and it took years.
Spoiler.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
based on a true story.
but it's a true story. I
Inspired,
don't know.
inspired.
Inspired,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but
This is yeah.
what you're about to get into, I think, comes at the very end of the movie,
It
like literally in
yeah.
the post film titles. So I just want to let people know
It
this is
it
kind of spoiler territory.
it does, but I think while you're watching it, you realize that like there's there's more going on here. There's at least to me. Um, so, and I guess let me step back and say that, like, when you look at the premise of this movie, and you could read the summary, whatever, um, it looks like, oh, wow, this could be like, a cool Scandinavian serial killer investigation movie thing. Cool. All right, let's watch it. Great actors. But it's a lot more than that, because um, Huang's co-wrote this movie with Stellan Skarsgård's wife, and he actually had become friends with the Skarsgårds for like years apparently, and I think this article that he read became like just this thing that was really of interest to him. He never spoke with anybody involved in the actual event or anything, of the actual real people, but he did enough digging where it felt like it could make a story out of this, and he wrote it with Stellan's wife, Megan. Um, and I think the interesting thing is when you narrow it down to these three characters, so the patient, um, the therapist, and the investigator. All three of these characters, interestingly enough to me, are very complex. There's things going on with these characters that are kind of, you know, more than meets the eye. They're all kind of plagued with things, um, as you know, as I guess fully realized human beings. They're um, the investigator has issues with. I mean, you could tell right away he has issues with his approach, but there's issues with his approach. But he's also and there's a subtle arc there too. I mean, he does dial it down a bit, but
Yeah.
I think he's also kind of plagued by this lack of connection that he has with his own family, which we never see. We hear about, but he's a solitary character, probably due to his own doing. Um, and then the therapist is also going through quite a bit. And when I say, she's a committed therapist, I mean like she's just a very committed individual. And you could tell it when she grabs onto something. I feel like when she grabs onto something, she doesn't let go. So she's been very committed to um, fertility treatments, working on fertility treatments because she wants to um, give birth. At one point, she says to, I think, her mentor, I want to create the perfect childhood. It's like what, and none of these. She's gotten so many, uh, basically, negative results, so many disappointments in the treatment, IVF treatments and everything. So there's that she's dealing with, and also she's so like laser focused on, excuse me, this patient, um, who starts out with one name and then he goes to Mads.
He
Um,
starts off as Siggy, and then he
Siggy,
goes to Mads Lake. Yeah.
Mads Lake, yeah. So, um, and this patient, it's never totally clear to me, like how. I mean, he is in a mental health facility, um, and it's never really clear to me how she's assigned to him, but it's neither here nor there. But um, it's it's interesting how you never see her with any other patients or talking about any other patients. She's just so, like I said, laser focused on him. And maybe that's a decision on the writers, and that's fine to me. I just thought it was is very interesting character study of three people who are kind of all running in circles and not coming up with anything really in their lives personally, because some of the themes are, being haunted by your past, and also totally confused by your past, or trying to create a future, and also being uncertain of your future. um I feel like that could be said for almost all three of these characters. you know um the patient is, really just kind of in a fog, really. I mean, played, I think, quite well by Gustaf Skarsgård. Um, and he is convinced that we learn gradually that he's convinced that his father had abused him and had, molested him multiple times, or had made him into a monster, and that's why he either abducted, raped, and killed little boys. But that that may or may not have happened, and it could have been in his dreams or whatever. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah. We'll talk spoilers. Folks out there who haven't seen the movie, I'd say turn back now, because we're just gonna get into it, because I can't really talk about this movie without getting into, I guess, the nitty gritty of it. You described it a minute ago as just like characters like kind of running around. I feel like that's kind of the movie. The whole time I'm watching it, I'm trying to figure out why am I watching this, or what am I as an audience supposed to be getting out of this movie? I'm serious. I mean, like, I don't have a problem with watching damaged people films. I mean, like, I referenced Requiem for a Dream in kind of a jokey way, but I think there's a lot that you can get out of that movie with these characters. Here, I had so many questions from scene to scene, from moment to moment, and then it was over. Looking back at the tapestry, I still don't think it makes any sense. And I think when I said that the director interview solidified a lot of my theories or hunches, or answered my questions, it's that Wong, when he read the GQ article, and he spent a long time working on the script, apparently with Mrs. Skarsgård, but he didn't interview anybody. He did a lot of reading, a lot of research, but he didn't talk to anybody involved in the story. And he also said that he condensed a lot of the information and characters down to focus on this triumvirate of Anna, the therapist, Mads, the patient, and Soren, played by Stellan Skarsgård, who's our beleaguered, investigator. You're right; they do all have these personal dramas going on. I think one of my issues is the movie takes place over the course of about 7 years, if I'm recalling correctly, and I don't see change in these characters fundamentally. I think a lot of movies lately are having that kind of problem. They jump forward, like, oh, 2 years later, 3 years later. People change a lot, or at least they go through a lot in the course of, a year, let alone multiple years, especially when you are around people, when you're kind of tied together. You learn things, that information changes you change other people, and all this other stuff. I feel like if this movie had taken place over the course of a month, it would have been a lot more believable. Okay, let's start with Anna. She has been trying and trying and trying to have a child, to make the perfect childhood. And she tells her kind of mentor therapist this, and at no point, I don't know if it's one of my problems is like this movie kind of screams therapy culture, in that people are just very kind of like soft and indirect, when I think you really need like a Dennis Leary type to bust into the room and just say, like, no, just stop. You're dumb. Don't do that. All right. This lady is okay. Let's just look at Andrea Riseborough and assume that the Anna Rudebeck character is about her age. You're talking about a lady who's in her early to mid 40s. She wants to start having a child to bring it into the world. She has no partner. She doesn't have friends or a family or any kind of a support network
that we know of.
That we know of, that is not even mentioned in the movie, except for her, her father, who dies towards the end of it.
And we don't know if she's starting. This could be years, and she could have started in her 30s.
Right, but that's sort of my point, is like she's trying to start a family, right? But there are none of the ingredients. I'm sitting there thinking, I did a lot of thinking of the children watching this movie, and I was thinking about, okay, what kind of child is she going to raise in that kind of an environment? She's very cold. She's very cut off from her emotions. just from what we can see on screen, and she doesn't appear to have anything or anybody in her life based on what we see on this 7-year journey. There's no new information like, oh, she actually has this close knit group of friends or aunts or anything. Like, this is going to be a safe, healthy environment.
She'll raise a
she's a
serial
therapist.
killer.
She, it would have been interesting if one of the conversations she'd had with Mads was like, oh yeah, you want your kid to turn out like me? What are you doing? Then we look at jumping into spoilers.
Yeah.
Finally, I think that was one of the kind of coolest reveals of the movie was there's an agent of the state who shows up to deliver the news that Anna's father has died.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Right. And she refuses to take the keys to the house until later the agent is leaving. She goes down the stairs and or no, it was something to do with paperwork, whatever. But the agent looks up and we see Anna from below, and it's clear she's got the belly. So the treatment has worked. Some time has passed since we last saw her. Cut to a few scenes later, they're in a van, and Mads has a complete and utter freak out in the back of the van because he just learns that his older brother Ralph has passed away. He grabs Anna, throws her to the floor of the van, and starts mercilessly choking her. How long does it take to pull a van over? Because I'm sitting there thinking, guys, you can hear her screaming, and it takes like a good minute for Stellan Skarsgård to say, wait, pull over. And then he gets in the van and almost rather ineffectually for a cop, like gets him off of her. I'm like, no, you're tasing this guy or something. It's not effective. And then, of course, we see that there's blood in Anna's skirt because she's losing the baby as she's being strangled. And yet, they're still cool at the end. I mean, there's that little bit of distance, but there's almost like I'm sorry. I'm sorry I killed your kid. And she's like, I still want to help you. I'm like, no, again, Dennis Leary needs to be in this movie. With Soren Rank, our investigator, he reminded me of Robert Duvall's character from Falling Down. Most of his relationship that we see is conversations with his estranged wife about their daughter, and she's finally leaving and packing up for divorce and all this other stuff, and we can see that frustrates him, and he's like banging the phone receiver and all this other stuff. But otherwise, I don't really get much of a read from him. He's kind of cold, he's distant. He does have, I think, the best arc in the film. You were right, because he kind of comes in he's almost at Dennis Leary levels, like, this guy's a child murderer, and what's up with all this, hippy dippy, therapy stuff. And at the end, he learns to take a gentler approach. At the exact moment, I feel like he needed to dig into your cop instincts, because this guy, if he's not a monster, he's definitely wasting everybody's time.
Yeah.
And, the whole thing about the child abuse, like at the end of it, I think we as an audience are supposed to think, well, okay, yeah, this guy had a terrible life. He was sexually abused by his father. And, it led him to claim to have abducted, raped, and murdered a series of boys. That's really tragic. It's dark, but I understand where he's coming from. But I'm wondering, is anything he said true? Because we have this whole storyline through the film about his older brother who's kind of disowned him. And he's like kind of, the younger, young Mads is kind of a screw up, and he's in and out of institutions and all this other stuff. And the older brother's like, what are you doing? Just get your life together. You keep talking about how dad molested you, but he never touched me. I never saw anything. And then Mads like, you had to have known. And the older brother is like, I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then when all this stuff comes out about like, oh, they're finding new bodies, or, cold cases are being solved, and they're blaming it on Mads, who's not taking credit for it. It destroys his brother. He gives him a heart attack, and they have this last phone call that, mm-hmm. really estranges them, and he freaking dies. And I'm like, I understand compassion, but there is also a dark place in my soul that says this guy is one trip across the train tracks away from making everything better.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, he's definitely tortured by something, and I mean, he's ill, multiple, kind of personality disorders, and I think it would have been nice to like delve into a little bit more, like what's triggering him to believe that he could commit those types of things. I mean, it kind of goes into it, but it seems like at one point in the movie, he heard um, something on the radio about one of the boys, and that was, killed in 1970 or whatever, and it like triggers something, and he's thinking, I did that, you know. But beyond that, what? But
Well, it's almost like I was going to say like a Shawshank thing. It's a bit of a stretch, but there was that line or that kind of the character in the Shawshank Redemption who, didn't really want to get released, and when he went out into the world, he couldn't quite handle it because he had gotten so used to being in prison.
yeah,
Mads is very close to being released from this institution, and he hears the thing on the radio, and then he goes and confesses to his therapist, "Oh yeah, I did that." And then she's like, "Well,
we
okay,
can't
thanks for
release you.
sharing, but you can't leave now."
Yeah, and he's
And
like,
so,
okay.
and he starts getting deeper and deeper into confessing all these things and getting tied into all these bodies that keep popping up. But my question is, if he didn't kill these people, how is he? I mean, I guess he's going on ride-alongs. The therapist, the cop, and the patient are going out to the sites of these, places that they're being exhumed. There's one boy that he claims he murdered with a hammer, and he like busts through the police line into this shallow grave. I don't even know if there was a body there.
I couldn't tell.
But he starts like railing away. I'm like, okay, you've got cops all around it. You are destroying evidence of a crime scene. Nobody's acting like real people in this movie. Two more examples. Early on, when what happened was Mads had told his sort of attendee, like a male nurse or something in the institution, that he is the one who killed whomever, and I guess he reported it to Anna.
Yeah.
Later, they're outside, and the attendee guy's like sitting at a picnic table eating a snack, and he's like, I'm not feeling so well. Mads, did you put something in this? Did you, Mads? What did you put in this?" And then Mads starts running away. I'm thinking, is this guy keeling over dead? Mads goes into town, gets supplies from a gas station, and goes into a gas station or convenience store bathroom and starts like huffing or something. And the next time we see him, he's just back in the institution. They never bring up the orderly attendant guy again. They never mention that he was out and about. Later on in the film, there's a journalist that comes to meet him. They're sitting together alone in a room.
Weird.
He jumps across the table and starts like beating and strangling her. And there's no one rushing in. Like, at least have a scene where there's someone from outside, like an orderly busting into the door and like wrenching them apart. No, it just ends with him strangling her. And then we're like, oh, it's back on the road with Mads and Anna and Soren. I'm like, what is this movie?
Yeah, those are definitely problematic aspects of the movie. Yeah, I was a little perturbed about that whole reporter thing. I'm like, first of all, anyway, it's like, what is happening here? Yeah, it's like nobody else was in the room with that in that interview. It's like, what? Anyway.
Or even like earlier, I think it was before that scene, but it was during one of the road trips out to one of the investigation sites. I don't know why I pronounced it that way just now, but yeah, Mads is just laying in a hotel room bed, and Anna is in the same hotel room. There's no cop, there's no police enforcement.
Right.
I mean, he's known to have shown violent behavior up to this point, and yet she's just like, "Oh yeah, you can sleep next to me. I'm good."
It is weird. She's almost like taking him on as like a surrogate, like little brother or son. It's like, because she has wanted to have a child for so long. It's really weird.
When I was looking at you also sent me a Wikipedia article on
Yeah.
the real life case that this was based on. And yeah, and I skimmed it. I'll link to that below, but I skimmed it, and there was a nice, not nice because it's all very chilling, but there's a detail in there about how the real life psychiatrist got in trouble for encouraging the real patient's belief that he had killed all these people.
Yeah.
Now, that's a movie.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, she's trying to make a name for herself by creating Sweden's first serial killer and really playing with his head and what tragedy that would be, maybe planting the memories of molestation or whatever in his mind. That's a really great idea for a film. I'm like, why didn't I watch that for 2 hours and 6 minutes?
And also, if he's being accused of these things, or I guess if he's a suspect, then wouldn't he be provided a lawyer as well?
Right. Not to mention the fact that, and they kind of touch on this in the Wikipedia article. Maybe they
Yeah.
elaborate on it, but I just kind of read the summary. That he had confessed to the abduction, rape, possible murder of 9 boys, 9 people.
Right.
When the movie opens, that's what he's in the institution for. And yet it turns out that we think, but at the end of the film, the little title card says he had confessed to doing that to 10 people, but then or I think around there, and then he recanted 10 years later, and then he was acquitted of all charges.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what the hell kind of legal system do they have in Sweden back in the 90s where you can convict someone with no forensic evidence on 9+ crimes?
Plus, you have to at least charge him for something for wasting the resources and time of the Finnish, police department and everything.
Yeah, and that was another thing I was thinking.
Swedish.
Like, and when I was thinking of the children, I was thinking of, we never meet the families of any one of these victims. And at this point, the story would have been, in the newspaper, like,
outrage.
Oh my gosh, yeah, like cold case or whatever. I want to know. I'd like to see the reaction of the real life families who I imagine were affected by this scam in reaction to this movie.
Yeah.
Right. How do you make it, like, if, let's just say my kid had been abducted or went missing and was never found, but there was someone who had claimed to do all these horrible things, and then that turns out not to be true. I still don't have closure. And then some guy comes along and says, I'm gonna take this GQ article and make it into a really cool movie without, I'm gonna do my own research, which, as we learned in the last, several years, is always a good idea on the internet. I'd be outraged. I admire this guy for making a film, but I feel like he should have left the inspired by true events thing off of it, because when I watch these movies more nowadays, I'm like, how does life account for this horrible plot hole or 7?
Right. Yeah, no, I hear you. So yeah, I mean, I did like it slightly more than you.
You liked it a lot more than
I know, I see its flaws. And I think, aesthetically, I think it's well made as far as color design, production values, and approach. Its tone is very much matching the weight of its subject and themes. A lot of earth tones and close-ups that are kind of like out of focus at times, and I feel like the performances, especially Gustaf, I mean, he's pretty convincing at being totally confused and lost about who he is, who he was. I mean, it's interesting because he obviously he's very unstable and very disturbed and complex, and should be, at least from what we see here, this fictionalized version of a real person. He should be kept away from society, but I felt like it was just a very, like, at times, like, I was exhausted just by watching him, just because, like, he was, a lot of times he was talking, and it was such almost like under his breath, and he seemed very unstable. He, he's a kind. I feel like he's the kind of guy that I might have, like, worked with at one point, and it's like, we don't talk to that guy over there. We don't talk to that guy over there. He wears the same clothes all the time and has greasy hair and just kind of keeps to himself. And yeah,
I totally understand what you're saying. I apologize. I was looking up something because I got something in my head that you made me think of, and I couldn't remember the movie. Edward Norton in Primal Fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
At the very end of the the whole time he's playing this mentally disturbed guy that's wrapped up in the murder of this, I think like a priest or a cardinal or something. And at the end, Richard Gere's attorney, who's got his own demons, gets him off, or at least I think he's not going to be executed, but he gets life in jail or something like that, or reason of insanity. And at the end, Ed Norton drops the act just for a moment, and you realize, oh my God, he's been working with a sociopath, not a sympathetic person. I'm not saying I wanted that in this movie, but
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there was something more, an angle, because I agree. This movie reminded me a lot of Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, a movie that I despise, but I respect it.
I loved it.
Look, here's the thing. It's, it is a movie I admire it, but I think the message is reprehensible.
Sure.
I think all the characters are scummy, and I felt unpleasant watching it.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you're talking about, like the whole idea of, oh, that's the guy we don't talk to. I'm like, yeah, I can't relate to any of these people. I might share their rage if someone did something like that to someone I loved, but I'm not going to go out like tracking down and murdering people.
I mean, we both know that when we watch characters in movies, we don't have to we don't always have to say, oh, I relate to that person. But are they interesting enough to watch? Are we still able to get involved in who these characters are? And I think
the answer for me on both that film and this film was a hard no.
I know. But if the actors are at least interesting enough to hold your attention, even if there are some flaws in the writing and stuff, and that's the case with this movie for me. Yeah, I feel like the performances here kind of won me over in the concept of just looking at these three subjects and how they're just kind of working with each other and circling their own issues but getting nowhere was kind of interesting for me.
Yeah, I think there is a great story here. I think it just needs to be based on a true story, or even some license taken with it. Like I said, condense the 7 years down to a month or two, or even half a year, and really get into these characters' lives. Like, how is this all affecting them? Because I'm sorry, but the Soren character, the investigator, his troubles with his wife and daughter don't at all inform his interactions with the patient and the therapist beyond any other kind of generic problem, like, oh, he's trying to quit alcohol, or oh, his mom died right before the movie started or something. It was just kind of a generic character detail. Now I think if there's this weird theme of like family problems that are at the periphery of this movie, I think if you'd done another pass of the screenplay to try and tie these together, even if it completely fictionalizes, as is pretty much done here, the true story, at least weave it into something that has a theme, has some kind of a message. Not that it has to be a message movie, but just something for me to walk away from. Like I was livid when I read those end credits. I'm like, then what the hell am I watching?
You wanted to see a bunch of bodies and convictions and him behind bars or something?
What I can recommend, if people want to see, and I'm going to call it the real version of this movie, watch maybe not all three of them, but at least the first Paradise Lost documentary.
Yeah.
Because that's about, a group of, young boys who went missing and they were turned up mutilated. And then there were 3 teenagers who were put through the court system, a very prejudicial town. And it was like their lifestyle, because they're into like, heavy metal and Satan music and all this other stuff. That paints a very convincing picture of how you can convict people who ended up going to jail for over 20 years on very little evidence, but a lot of prejudice. That's what was missing from this movie. And I think that's the better version of the story.
Well, yeah. And in that Wikipedia page, there's no mention of this movie, but there's a mention of the 2015 documentary, The Confessions of Thomas Quick. There's also a television drama series from 2018, and Mikhail Hafström's thriller, The Perfect Patient, from 2019, which this was inspired by.
Wow.
Yeah. So a documentary about this would be interesting, but also, and honestly, like watching this, and also lately, some of the movies I've been watching, and I hate to say this, but like I feel like, there seems to be so much more going on here and so much more to this, especially when you talk about how years pass. Um, make a limited series on Apple TV Plus or something like that. Like I don't know if you've seen Blackbird with uh, Paul Walter Hauser
No.
and Taron Egerton. Fantastic, really good, really good on Apple TV Plus. But that's based on a true story, like true crime in the Midwest in the States here. Um, that takes its time to unfold and figure out. And I think it would have been interesting to see what time and like episodic treatments to the story would have done to this overall story. Because could you imagine how much, you know, can you imagine how much more like frustrating it would be for especially the investigator, but possibly for the therapist to really still not get anywhere within that time frame, in what we're doing. And even after she has that miscarriage, she still wants to, hey, can we get back to where we were? It's like, I don't know. I mean, I would like want to be done with it, but I think there's just something also quite unnerving and disturbing about her too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's that one scene where she finds out, she gets the phone call that the treatment hadn't taken. It's kind of
Mhm.
like the last, I don't know if it was the last ditch effort or
Effort,
just
yeah.
or the longest or the last in a long string of it. She was completely demoralized. She picks up a John in a car and they have sex, and then she like violently like kicks him out of the car. And
And
then she
then,
does the thing where she puts her legs up to make sure everything went in. I mean,
yeah,
I need more from this character. I mean, because that's a really interesting avenue to pursue. How does that relate to what she's doing with this character?
yeah.
How does that relate to what kind of family she wants?
And how
Um,
often did she do that? Was that a
how
one
often
off?
does she do
Yeah,
that? Yeah, right.
yeah.
There's almost too much here. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more to be delved out of these characters in the story. Uh, you know,
Also, I mean, I think condensing it down into a more reasonable timeline answers a question that you had brought up earlier and that I had through the entire film. Does she only have one patient? Like, does Sweden have universal health care to the point where they can just assign one doctor to everybody who's got mental problems? They just follow them around for like decades on end, or does she have other patients? Is she writing a book or a dissertation or something about this guy? And
yeah.
the same thing with our detective character. We don't see him take any other case in this
I
entire film for 7 years.
Yeah, he is kind of reporting to. I couldn't really understand what this other guy's title was. It didn't seem like he had some type of authority. It might not have been a police authority. It could have been a government, local magistrate or government authority. But um, at first, when the film opened, I thought, well, maybe this guy's a retired investigator or something, and maybe he was assigned to the original cold case, and this attracted his attention or whatever. Um, yeah,
That's there. There you go. That's a better movie right there.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
he's spending his twilight years chasing down this guy, and
yeah,
maybe his wife doesn't have a daughter, but she by year 7, she's ready to leave him
yeah,
because he's become obsessed with this case, and he was
yeah,
supposed to leave that all behind when he retired. Maybe he retired early or something because he just was about to snap, and now it's bringing
yeah.
back all these demons. Wh- We're rewriting a movie that we're talking about, which is unfair, but these are
Yeah.
the kinds of things when I'm watching it, I'm like, why am I not watching something a bit smarter?
So, I mean, to me, very interesting director that I'd like to see what he's doing next. And of course, these three actors are always good.
Yes.
It's just a matter of really you know sharpening up the screenplay and embellishing a little bit here and there, a little bit more. Um, yeah, or it's you know people complain about 2.5, 3 hour movies. I don't know if I'd want to make something like this longer, but I think I could handle this in episodes. It'd be interesting.
Right. Or, I mean, the thing is, that's the kind of the ironic complaint about the 2.5, 3 hour movie is a lot of shows people watch are half hour, 40-minute, hour long, things. So you kind of have you have the potential to have a miniseries within a long movie. But yeah, I'm with you. I'd watch something with a bit more meat on it. And it's unfortunate because, I really don't like this movie, but it comes down to the one problem, which is, as you say, it's the screenplay.
Yeah.
I think everything else is on point, but it's underserved by a script that I don't think works. And I don't think it honors the real life people who are involved in this story. I would like to see, a documentary about it. I'd like to see when this thing opens up, what kind of press it gets. Are they going to talk to people who were involved in it? Would they watch this movie? If they did, would they say, this is an abomination? Or, this is kind of like just the weird atmosphere of Sweden in the 90s in terms of the court system. It was wild.
Could be. And it's set in the 90s, but I'm not sure. I have to do a little bit more research. I'm not sure on the actual decades of when this actually transpired, because it seemed like he was convicted of it in like 2008 or something like that.
I thought it was 2001, but I could be, or maybe
it says
something. I don't know.
Between 1994 and 2001, he was convicted of these murders, and he withdrew his confessions in 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's baffling. So that it just makes me want to watch that documentary from 2015. So maybe that's some sometimes you watch movies and you're like, oh, I'm inspired to find out more because that was so great, and some are so confounding that you're like, all right, what's really happening here?
Yeah, and that's I hate to to me, that's the mark of a great movie. If you watch, especially something inspired by a true story, or if it's a documentary that's based on a book or something, like, oh, I got to go buy that book.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I have the adverse reaction to a movie, but I still want to know more. So maybe someday I'm going to need to wipe the depressive funk of this story off of me. But maybe one day we can talk about that 2015 documentary, get to the heart of the real story.
And maybe one day I'll recommend a movie that we'll both like.
Hey, I was afraid there was going to be another Manchester by the Sea situation, so I'm just glad we're both smiling afterwards.
Or The Old Oak 2.
I forgot about that one, and we just talked about it.
I know you did.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, yeah, for sure. We will talk about something that we both love someday. But regardless, I love talking to you about movies, David. So, and David Fowley of Keeping It Real, of course, folks, be sure and check out David's stuff and support him. His information is down below, along with links to all the stuff we've been talking about surrounding this movie. I can't quite recommend watching What Remains, or as I like to call it at the end, because it turns out there were no bodies, really. It could be called What Remains with like a little shrug emoji, but that's just cruel. But yeah, David.
Mark.
Yeah, right.
So exclamation point, what remains?
that's more Mel Brooks than anything else. So David, anything you want to promote or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No,
well,
I'm all good. You just promoted everything so far.
All right.
Soon enough. I have some things in the plans.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing about those whenever you are ready to reveal them, and I will be watching your career with great interest, as the man once said. But anyhow, David Fowley, thank you so much. Thank you out there. If you liked this episode, please like and subscribe and all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks and take care.